Winter to the hill people of West Texas is mostly wind and dust. It's a time when the hard-scrabble land is at its harshest. The once green pastures roll brown and dormant to the horizon, and the streams and the ponds are low. This time of year, particularly an election-off year, has been a time of trouble for presidents as well, and most particularly when it follows a heavily carried presidential election. High policy decisions must be hammered out and laid before a new session of Congress in the form of two major documents: the forthcoming federal budget statement and the State of the Union address. This responsibility alone would be awesome enough, but coupled with a Vietnam conflict that must be continually explained to the American people, a troublesome economy in danger of becoming overheated, and an upcoming divided Congress, these create a political climate, like the Texas winter, that is not always pleasant. Added to these burdens was the uncertain future of the Great Society programs that had swept the country during the sessions of the 89th Congress. The summit had not yet been reached. A cautious Congress, budget cutbacks, and a tangle of state and local administrative problems on the New Year's horizon created evidence that this crusade against society's greatest enemies may be slowed, or worse, may level off and fade. This was the climate, the land, and the unfinished tasks that faced Lyndon Johnson on the 1st of December, 1966. They flew in regularly throughout the month of December. In the past, on trips like these to the LBJ Ranch, a briefcase was all that was needed. Now, Valpacks, overnight bags, and suitcases were in order. They were summoned by the president to help in the shaping of the nation's economic, social, and political destiny. They comprised a host of staffers, fact-finders, and prophets, special assistants, consultants in specialized areas, cabinet members and department heads, experts from both public and private walks of life whose opinion the president values. Each will have his chance to suggest, report, advise, and recommend. Each brings a collection of facts and opinions, and the sum total goes on the scale. Only then can the president make the final evaluation and, ultimately, the final decision. One of the toughest problems was the question of the tax increase. True, it could bank some inflationary fires and bring federal income and outlay more in line. But as some conjecture had it, it could also promote a recession. Here in these ageless hills, far from Pentagon corridors and granite federal buildings, the president would have to evaluate the nation's force structure, and in the light of current intelligence estimates, consider if a $30 billion anti-missile system would be justified. With the war in Vietnam costing more than anticipated a year ago, there were pressures to reduce spending at home. Clearly, budget cuts in welfare programs would be called for. As the president sought ways to squeeze the water out of the budget, he could not neglect the needs of the cities, the education of the children, and the reduction of poverty. The problems were not simple ones, and each, whether relating to the war, domestic spending, national security, or the shaping of the country's future, each interfaced with the others, and each had to be considered not alone, but as only one part of a greater picture. An outsider could only guess when the answers would be firm. It was clear, however, that when the answers came, they would reflect hours, days, and weeks of exhaustive questioning and debate on each facet of each problem. On Saturday, December the 3rd, the president took a colorful break from his busy schedule at the ranch. In company with Mrs. Johnson, the Secretary of State, and the Mexican ambassador, he paid a good neighbor visit to Ciudad Acuna, a small river town across the Rio Grande from Del Rio, Texas. The president of Mexico, Gustavo Diaz Ordaz, and his wife greeted their American visitors on the bridge spanning the river that separates the two countries. Ciudad Acuna is a small town, but its role in hemispheric relations is a big one. It is here that the United States and Mexico are building the Amistad, or Friendship Dam, as a joint international project. The Amistad Dam, when completed in 1969, will prevent the devastating floods that, in the past, had ravaged both sides of the border. It will serve, too, as a broad base for hydroelectric power and recreational waters to be shared by both countries.
Last April, we met in your beautiful city to pay homage to a hero of the past. Today, we meet here on the frontier to inspect a monument to the future. The work that we see going on around us tells us the dramatic story of what two peoples working together can accomplish. Here we see the Mexican and the United States technicians and laborers working side by side, throwing up the earth embankments and erecting the concrete structures. What we are accomplishing along this river, Mr. President, sets a pattern which I hope will be increasingly repeated by neighboring countries throughout this hemisphere.
At every opportunity afforded them, the press tried to pin down the president and his Council of Economic Advisors on firm answers to the tax increase question and its impact on the economy in general. If they received no answers, it was largely their own fault. Too often in the past, the chief executive had seen his remarks to the press blown out of proportion. Intimations revealed that were non-existent. It was clear that little or no definitive information would be released until the final figures were on the table. In spite of high interest rates and tight money, the economy was healthy and strong. If the press needed to be reminded of how far the country had come economically in Lyndon Johnson's lifetime, he turned the trick by demonstrating some 1900 Texas-style austerity. We might have problems now, but not like the ones that faced rural America in those yesteryears.
Some of the oldest words never seem to grow old. And among them are these: gallantry above and beyond the call of duty. 15 months ago, Sergeant Robert Emmett O'Malley did more than fight for honor. In a place of great danger, he ignored danger. Wounded, he refused to consider his own safety. At the risk of his own life, he shielded other men's lives. Today, I will give him the highest medal his nation can offer. I can think of only one gift sufficient to honor men like this. We can assure this man, and we can assure every man who wears our uniform, that their cause is a good cause, that the principles they stand for are sound principles, that the battle they are fighting deserves their bravery.
As the nation pays homage to the new roster of 20th century wartime heroes, she also works incessantly behind the scenes to eliminate the very conflicts that provide the stage for such heroism. Some of this work came to light on December 8th, when, from the Texas White House, the President announced that agreement had been reached on the Outer Space Treaty, a resolution he himself had initiated in May of 1966. Lunar Orbiter 2 photos and the successful completion of the Gemini program furthered the evidence that moon landings may soon be a reality. With these landings will come a new spectrum of international relationships among the peoples mastering this new frontier. When ratified by all member nations, the treaty will indeed represent an historical milestone, not only in the annals of space exploration, but in the endless story of man's attempts to achieve a lasting peace with his own kind, on both Earth and beyond. On December the 9th, the first family returned to Washington for a mid-month round of presidential tasks, some in the national spotlight, and some that could only be carried out in the privacy of the cabinet room. The President and Mrs. Johnson opened the White House social season with a gala dinner in honor of all the members of the National Council of the Arts. The Council, brought into being by President Johnson in 1964, has a broad mandate from Congress to encourage the development of the arts throughout the country. The Council's ranks are filled with the most distinguished names to be found among the creative professions. The President's responsibilities are incredibly diverse, and this was never more in evidence than on 15 December. He unveiled the model of the United States exhibit to this year's World's Fair, the Canadian Expo 67, noting that the familiar geodesic domes of Buckminster Fuller are here to stay. Architect Fuller and the Canadian ambassador were on hand to fill in the President with the details of the exhibit and to present him with an honorary passport to the exposition. The World's Fair has traditionally symbolized the technological achievements of the industrial nations. But with these advances have come a host of problems unique to the affluent societies. The world is now entering the last third of the 20th century. Realizing the problems would not get simpler, but only more complex, the President called for the creation of an international center, a forum where interested nations could examine and together find solutions to complexities common to all. On the same day, he discussed the details of the Christmas truce in Vietnam with the ambassador to the United Nations, Arthur Goldberg. Later, he welcomed Ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge and received an up-to-the-minute briefing on the outlook in Southeast Asia.
There isn't any doubt in my mind that history will record that President Johnson's decision, announced on July 28, 1965, to commit U.S. troops was a historic decision. Historic for Southeast Asia, historic for us, historic for everybody. The great edge of East Asia has been denied to the expansionism of Peking, and that this would surely not have happened had we been driven out of Vietnam or had we abandoned Vietnam.
The President then received credentials from the Bulgarian ambassador, and in so doing, built new bridges to the east. 2 weeks earlier, the United States agreed to upgrade her legations in Sofia and Budapest to embassy level, and in return to receive the ambassadors from Bulgaria and Hungary. In upgrading the American representatives to these Eastern European countries, the United States may very well see the last of her ministers, an office first held by such statesmen as Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams. In her earlier days, the United States was not permitted the privilege of sending ambassadors abroad. She was too small and relatively unimportant. This philosophy is not shared by America today, however, for all nations, no matter how small, how new, are considered important, and their ambassadors are received in the traditional time-honored ceremony. The President concluded his official day by ushering in the Christmas season in Washington's annual holiday ritual.
And tonight, even as we speak, American men are fighting in a strange land, a half a world away. And yet, at this time of Christmas, there are signs of hope. In the United States, we have made more progress in human rights in the past 6 years than we have made in all the previous 100 years. Throughout the world, old quarrels are being forgotten, and nation is joining nation in a common effort to try to improve the lot of man. But let us here tonight dedicate this Christmas tree with hope and great confidence, and let us rededicate ourselves to the principles of our Bill of Rights, to give light to them that sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace.
Moments later, the first family returned to the White House to preside over another annual holiday ritual, the Christmas party for the staff. The antics of the Baja Marimba Band may not get them appointed to the National Council of the Arts, but it would ensure an unforgettable evening at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. His mid-month task completed, the President in a few hours would board Air Force One and wing his way back to Texas for his own holiday and continued work on the budget. At a Christmas bake sale in Johnson City Park, the First Lady stocked up on some holiday delicacies, Texas style. Pyracantha berry preserves, pickled okra, poppy seed salad dressing, and the rarest of hill country appetite teasers, agarita jelly. Johnson City is far removed from the pomp and circumstance of Washington, and yet in its own way, the people and the town are more representative of America than the nation's capital. It is for this reason that the President and Mrs. Johnson, whenever the opportunities arise, entertain international visitors at the ranch. Here in capsule form, the rest of the world can see what America is all about. As Lyndon Johnson frequently remarked, it's the sort of place where they love you while you're alive. They take care of you when you're sick, and they miss you when you're dead. The Johnsons are an integral part of the community, and their presence is felt for reasons other than their national prominence. The President's breeding stock brings top prices at the Blanco County Hereford Association sales. Mrs. Johnson plays an active part in local civic work. And although it is sometimes difficult for either of them to completely step out of the spotlight, even in rural Texas, moments like these offer a refreshing change of pace from the glittering formality of Washington. It was largely partisan politics, but the rumblings from White Sulphur Springs earlier in the month were loudly amplified by the press. As leader of the Democratic Party and longtime advocate of the principle that frank and open discussions can lead to a meeting of the minds among reasonable men, President Johnson invited the Democratic governors to the ranch to speak their minds and to clear the air. Of the 18-man group that met in West Virginia, 9 accepted the president's invitation. Their spokesman was Governor Hughes of Iowa.
The president gave us every opportunity to discuss every point that was made during the discussions at White Sulphur Springs. The communication was very open and very frank, and the problems that each governor felt that existed in his particular state, he was given the opportunity to present them. And I think the meeting as such cleared the air for all of us of governors, and also gave the president an opportunity to express his views to us in all of the areas of discussion.
And I think Governor Hughes made it clear that some people are paid to provoke fights and some are paid to prevent them, and our job is to prevent them. And I think we all have the same overall objective, the greatest good for the greatest number, but people at different levels in the city or the state or the federal government do have different approaches, and we Democrats have never been known for suppressing our differences. And we've always found you people willing partners to cooperate in advertising.
The president's burdens in the month of December were not lightened by the resignation of his well-known press secretary, Bill Moyers. Since he had taken over the job in 1965, Moyers had won the trust and respect of Washington's hypercritical press corps. A tireless worker, totally dedicated to his president and to the details of his job, Moyers had become one of the top policy advisors in the White House. A jack of all trades, he was not only a buffer between the chief executive and the press, but worked directly upon many legislative matters, made foreign policy trips, and as one of his last tasks, would help draft the State of the Union message during the upcoming weeks. On the day before Christmas, the President, Mrs. Johnson, and daughter Linda flew to Kelly Air Force Base. Due to arrive within moments were combat wounded veterans of Vietnam, heading for military hospitals in the San Antonio area. The President took the occasion to wish everyone a Merry Christmas.
And we can assure every man who wears our uniform that their cause is a good cause, that the principles they stand for are sound principles, that the battle they are fighting deserves their bravery. It is a cause which deserves not only the bravery of our soldiers, but the patience and the fortitude of all of our citizens. It far outweighs the reluctance of men who exercise so well the right of dissent, but let others fight to protect them from those whose very philosophy is to do away with the right of dissent.
On Christmas Eve, it was apparent that the dissenters would still dissent. The war in Vietnam would still go on. The State of the Union would still be unresolved, and the tax increase would still be up in the air. Momentarily, however, these problems would be put aside as the President and his family, as well as people all over the world, turned to celebrate this most joyous of holidays. It became a time out of war, a 48-hour respite when the fighting, for the most part, would stop. A year ago, the fighting had stopped, and American bombers remained on their pads and carrier decks for 37 days in one of the most energetic peace offensives in diplomatic history. But it had accomplished nothing. This year, there was reason for renewing hope. A letter drafted by Ambassador Goldberg and approved by the President was hand-carried to Secretary General U Thant. The letter sounded once again the United States commitment to seek an honorable and lasting settlement of the war. It may have been old language, but there was a new ring to the words. We turn to you with the hope and request that you will take whatever steps you consider necessary to bring about the necessary discussions which could lead to a ceasefire. I can assure you that the government of the United States will cooperate fully with you in getting such discussions started promptly and in bringing them to a successful conclusion. If this latest bid for peace talks bears fruit, it will not be known during the few days remaining in 1966. When the 48 hours expire, the guns of Vietnam will once again seek out their targets. On Saturday, the 31st of December, the President held his 93rd press conference. His deepest regret was his administration's inability to bring peace to the world. As the year came to a close, it was clear that America was entering a time of transition, both in foreign affairs and on the domestic front. In Europe, overtures were being made between countries traditionally estranged. Yet, at the same time, communication was improving between America and the Soviet Union. On the domestic scene, there was no announcement by year's end as to the possibility of a tax increase, nor firm figures on the budget. But there was no doubt that during 1967, the President would continue to devote all his energies to the strengthening of his people. The Great Society had enjoyed a magnificent beginning, but there was still a long road ahead before the summit would be reached. Programs may have to undergo change. Goals may have to be reshaped. But in this time of transition, the country would continue to move ahead in a constant direction upwards.